The books are here today. Not all of them, but I have been waiting forever to get the signed books for Bloodless Ties to do the signed books orders. So I'm gonna head downstairs to get those packages. I've been trying to like prepare ahead of time because I know this place is gonna turn into chaos as soon as I get them up here. So we've been clearing the counter. We cleared the coffee table. This is gonna be the workstation. We got the boxes made already. The paperbacks were delivered. The hardcovers are still not here. I don't think they'll be here for another week or two, but at least we can get started on the orders. Can confirm. When I tell you I am sweating. Let's open them up. I also ordered some like writing craft books I've been wanting to get. So I think this was in here. And for whatever reason, they always split up the orders and like mail like one separate copy without the rest. So I think that's what this one is. I think it looks pretty good. I wish we had the hardcover here. Not that I don't love the paperbacks, because the hardcover has all of the bonus content in the back and I'd like to see that. Here's the stack. So I'm guessing this is kind of going to eat up my entire day as working on this. Eat up makes it sound like I don't want to do it. I do. It'll be fun. This lighting, like the light behind me, really is not helpful. I don't really think that helped either, but I figured I would open the other box too in case you were curious. So I got Seven Figure Fiction. This is a book that I've been meaning to read for a while and it was talked about a lot at the conference I was just at. So looking forward to reading this one. And then I got a ton more of these like writers helping writers guides because I have several of them already and I like them. I have the Emotion Thesaurus, the Negative Trait Thesaurus, and the Positive Trait Thesaurus. So I just picked up the Conflict Thesaurus, Volume 2 and Volume 1. Both of these are Conflict. A Writer's Guide to City Spaces, A Writer's Guide to Vocations, Careers, and Jobs, Rural Settings, and Psychological Trauma. Literally, I just decided I'm just gonna buy the whole series. I'm gonna write it off on my taxes. I'll link down below if you want to try them. I can definitely vouch for the ones that I already have. I'll let you know what I think of these once I get started on them. Now we're gonna get started on that. I thought I'd be able to get more done than I'm able to, because a lot of the people who ordered the paperback also ordered the hardcover. So there's only so many orders I can fulfill until the hardcovers are here. I also don't have the tarot cards that I ordered here yet. They said they'll be here anywhere from a couple of days ago to the 26th. So with the holiday and stuff, I don't even know. I also realized with one of these orders, I forgot to order enough paperbacks of Wicked Souls. I think that's the only thing I'm missing though, so I'm gonna have to order some of those. Luckily the paperbacks get here a lot faster than the hardcovers do. But yeah, this is what things are looking like at the moment. It's chaotic. I actually thought I would talk to you guys. There were some comments on my last video that like I just could not answer well in a comment. Like I just had too much to say, so I figured I would just answer them in the next vlog. So if you haven't seen the previous video, I was basically just reflecting and talking about my feelings about reviews and just like my mindset shifts. And yeah, if you haven't watched it yet, I talked for a long time, so I can't really sum it up super well here. I didn't put it into words very well the first time around. I'll have it linked down below. So there were some questions I was going to answer, and then I also just kind of wanted to address, I don't know if people meant for it to come across this way. I might just be like feeling defensive. But like some comments about like reviews being for readers, which I would agree with. So I just wanted to put in like, I'm aware of that, especially coming from being a reader and an online reviewer long before I published. I find it frustrating from the author's perspective because not just like this comment in particular, but like things I've seen in the past and things I see on TikTok where like the book community exists because of authors, because we write the books, and then like the second authors participate or anything, it's very common that they're shut down and that they're told like this isn't the place for you. You're not allowed to have an opinion, like you're not allowed to speak on it. And I think like replying to someone's review or like putting someone on blast is a totally different thing. Authors behaving badly is a totally different thing. But to just say like, oh, reviews are for readers is dismissive in the sense that like, especially for indie authors, we don't have the privilege of just like not thinking about it, not worrying about it, never looking at it because it affects us. And I don't just mean like emotionally. I don't just mean like reading the review can like hurt your feelings. I mean from the business side of it, it could hurt your sales. The number of reviews you get works in like the algorithm of Amazon, which works with your marketing and whether or not you're able to sell the book. So it's not just like getting fixated on reviews because you're too sensitive and like you got your feelings hurt. It's a business and it's something that you do have to pay attention to. So all the comments, not just like on this video, I mean like in the book community in general, whenever these discussions come up of like telling authors like, oh, that's not for you. On the one hand, I totally get where that's coming from, but I also think there's another side of it that a lot of readers don't understand. Like if we could stay out of it completely, I'm sure a lot of authors would like to do that, but it is something that affects our livelihood and our jobs, and it is something that we have to deal with, and it's also something that a lot of us don't seek out, but we get tagged in them anyway, or people send them to us anyway. You don't just get to create in a vacuum and then throw it out to the world and then go back into your hole and write the next book and just like pretend nothing else exists. It just doesn't work like that. So anyway, I feel like I didn't really articulate myself very well in the last video, so if in any way that came across as me like, I don't know, speaking badly about reviewers, or reviewers can say whatever they want about books in general. I just don't think, you can't really understand what it's like mentally and emotionally and how taxing it can be as an author until you are one. So that discussion was mainly meant to be aimed at other authors who might be struggling with it and just kind of like how I deal with it internally and what I have found to be helpful in this case. So that's all I wanted to say about that. It was meant to be encouraging. I don't know if it came across that way. Someone asked, do you have to write to a vibe? I feel like I have to have a feeling while writing, and if I'm not in that feeling, I don't write my best. I'm talking song on repeat, setting up mood boards, writing by candlelight mood, LOL. I totally get what you're talking about. The answer is yes and no. I feel like there's a distinct difference in the writing that I produce when I'm in that zone. Like those are always the chapters that like they come out like fully formed the first time and I barely edit them from rough draft to final draft. Like they just come out exactly the way that they need to be. But unfortunately, I can't always write when I'm in that zone, or I would never finish my books. I would not get very far. I would be moving very slowly if I just like waited for that inspiration to strike. So I do have to force myself to write even when I'm not in that mood. And I think it shows in the writing when I'm writing a chapter that I'm not like in the mood for, which you try and go back and you fix in editing. But I do totally get what you're saying, because when I have that feeling, that writing, it just comes out so like it can feel like pulling teeth writing some chapters, and then that it's like you wrote it in your sleep, like you didn't even break a sweat. Now this is the question that like made me feel like I needed to respond to this in a video instead of a comment, because I had so much to say. So the question is, I'm genuinely curious if this is how you feel about the reception of the Anti-Virginity Pact. So yeah, if you haven't seen the previous video, I would really recommend watching that, because there's no way for me to like sum up what she's asking exactly here. It was your debut novel, which could have easily swayed your decision to push forward and keep publishing. I just purchased it and I'm about 20 pages in and incredibly impressed thus far with your storytelling and the voice of Mare. I'm loving Joanna as a character, but a lot of reviews don't seem to line up with my opinion. You have so much confidence, which I think I've commented on before. Thank you. I think reviews like the ones I've seen on Goodreads are the reason why publishing seems so terrifying to me. So yeah, just curious if you felt this grounded about your work after the Anti-Virginity Pact. For one thing, thank you for the compliments. That was very nice. This is another yes and no answer. No, in the sense that like when the book first came out, and that was like my first novel out in the world, I was not this calm. I was not this grounded and at peace with it when I was getting those negative reviews and stuff. There's a video of me on my vlog channel talking about like how I was having a hard time with it. I can link it down below if I can find it. I think the title is actually just I'm having a hard time. So 8 books in now, I feel like I've gotten a lot better at dealing with it and feeling more equipped to handle it than I did with that first book. However, now looking back at that first book and like seeing the reviews of it, I do feel at peace with it and I do feel more grounded with it. But there's a difference with that book. Looking back on, there's a difference with all of the books and all of the reviews, because I think with the more books that you publish and the more reviews that you see, you start to get better at distinguishing what advice is helpful, what reviews are helpful, and which ones are not, which goes back to something I was saying in that video about like, is this something that I agree with? Is there something I wish I could change about the book? And it's a lot easier for me to pinpoint now when people say critiques of the books, oh, that's not helpful, that's really subjective, versus something like, oh, no, that's a good point. Like, for example, the anti-relationship year, a trend in the reviews is a lot of people talk about the back and forth That book, if you haven't read it, it's written in 2 timelines, the then timeline and a now timeline, which is a pretty common narrative structure. And some reviews would refer to that as flashbacks. And they would be like, I didn't like all the jumping back and forth. I didn't understand why there were so many flashbacks, when they weren't flashbacks. The book is written in 2 timelines evenly. It switches off every chapter. And that's just a specific stylistic choice that I made with that book. So anyone who comments on that is like, I wish it had just been written chronologically, they're perfectly entitled to that opinion, but that opinion is in no way, like, I just like immediately discard that, because I'm like, that's fine, but this book needed to be written this way in order for it to be the book that I wanted it to be. Like, that's one of the main things that I love about that book, is the 2 timelines. And so when people say they didn't like the book for that reason, I'm like, oh, well, it just wasn't a good fit. They just want to read a book that's written chronologically. It doesn't mean that I needed to write this book chronologically, because that's like a fundamental part of this book. And it's something that I love about it. And I absolutely would not consider changing it. And I would absolutely not write this book chronologically. So that's an example of something that a lot of people commented on, and it's valid, it's fair. And could I have executed it differently to potentially make them like it better? Maybe. But then there's also comments about the length of the Anti-Relationship Year, which is my shortest book. It's somewhere in like the 60,000 word range. It's a short book for sure. And so there are plenty of reviews of people saying they wish it had been longer, they wish there had been more to it, they wish they'd maybe gotten some of Miller's perspective, they wish there'd been more to that ending. And I see that and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It is a short book. I probably could have added more to it. That's a fair point. There's different kinds of feedback that you get. I feel like the later you get into your career, the easier it is to determine what's simply not a good fit and it was just not a good match with that person in that book, or something that like, that's a good point, we'll keep that in mind and we'll try and improve in that area with the next book, you know? So with the Anti-Virginity Pact, a lot of the critiques fell in both camps with that book. Every time this book comes up, I don't know how much to say, but I honestly am so tired of like tiptoeing around it. So whenever people leave some kind of review where they're like, I'm a Christian and I'm so mad this book paints Christianity in such a bad light, like you don't see her talking about other religions, or like she doesn't even give positive examples of Christianity, that, no. And I was about to say sorry. I'm not gonna say sorry about it. The point of the book, just over your head, and it's fine. Or you're purposefully not seeing the point of the book, and that's fine. But other critiques about the pacing and the plotting, valid critiques. That is a book that I published when I was 22 or 23. But I wrote it and I came up with the idea when I was 17. I was still in high school when I wrote that book. And then I found it again my senior year of college and I rewrote it and then I published it. And looking back on it now, I look back on it very fondly and I love it for a lot of different reasons, but I also know it's a flawed book. It is. It's not my best work, but it's the best that I could do at that age. And so I'm at peace with that book because I look at it and I'm like, I can see how far I've grown from that book, and I know that was the best that I could do at that time in my life. That is the best that I was able to make that book at that point. And so I'm at peace with it. And then when people critique it in the reviews, I'm like, yep, that's fair, because if I were to write the book now, I would be able to do better now. But I have no desire to go back and rewrite that book because, I don't know, the book feels authentically itself. Like that is, I got that idea at that point in my life for a reason. And that was how I was able to write the book at that point. And so like trying to write it now, it wouldn't make sense. I don't know if I can really explain what I mean there. If I was meant to write that book right now with the abilities that I have now and the tools that I have now, I would have gotten the idea now, not back then. Does that make sense? I look back at that book and I'm really grateful for that experience. I'm really grateful for how I've grown since then and from the things that I've learned since then, from writing that book, from making mistakes with that book, from seeing the reviews of that book and realizing people were right about a lot of things. People were wrong about a lot of things, but people were right about a lot of things. And I learned a lot. It was hard. It's hard to see your work ripped apart like that, for sure. But if you're scared of publishing because of that kind of reaction, it's gonna suck to go through it, but I would do it anyway. Like, you're gonna get better. You're gonna learn from it. It's gonna be hard, but do it anyway. If it's something that you want, do it anyway. So yeah, I had a really hard time after that book came out. It was never a question of whether or not I was gonna continue publishing, though. I'm trying to make sure I address all of the points of your question. Just because this is what I've always known I was going to do. It was a setback, it was a bump in the road, but we kept going. But there are parts of that book that I feel the same way that I feel about, like with Bloodless Ties. Like a lot of people don't like Joanna's character. I wouldn't change a damn thing about Jo. People are perfectly entitled to not like her, and I understand why they don't like her. But I look back at honestly all of my characters, but specifically her character, almost as like a protective kind of way. I'm like, she's 18 and obviously I like created her backstory, so like I understand why she is the way that she is, and so I have a lot of sympathy for her and I have a lot of empathy for her and like why she is the way that she is. And the reason why I really loved writing her character from that book and then into the Anti-Relationship Year, which is her book, which goes from her freshman year to her senior year, is I loved working with her character over that 5-year span and like seeing her growth. And so a lot of people didn't like her because she is incredibly flawed and she is incredibly, she's got issues, especially at the beginning, and people weren't very understanding or forgiving of that. I don't know, I kind of like writing messy characters who are oftentimes unlikable because people aren't perfect, and it's so easy to like paint yourself as the hero of your story and think everything's through, and then we don't forgive others for having the same kind of flaws that we do. And so I don't know, my love of Jo doesn't line up with some of the reviews for sure, and it doesn't bother me because I understand why people don't like her, but I'm also like, I wouldn't change anything about her. She's a teenager who acts like a teenager. Like, I hope that answered your question. I've gotten questions, not just on this video, in the past, of like people are clearly confused, and I understand why, because it's my own fault. I have so many book titles that sound similar. Recently, it wasn't intentional, I didn't even realize it until lately. So many of my books start with B, and so a lot of people have been confused like with things that I've said about Broken Perfect Lies versus Bloodless Ties. They sound so similar, so I get it. So people were asking like, well, do you think some of the things that you disagreed with that your editor said lines up with like what readers were saying about Bloodless Ties? The editor was for Broken Perfect Lies, not Bloodless Ties. Different book. That's it. Wanted to answer some questions. We might have to put the packing of the signed books on pause until the rest of this stuff gets here. I have packed up a lot of the like just paperback orders, but then left them unsealed, so then when the tarot cards get here, I can still throw everything in. No. Pretty Caroline.